Hello and welcome back aboard Narrowboat Gentian, where after seemingly at least 40 days and 40 nights of non-stop rain, we at last have a glorious sunny day. The sky is blue, the sun is shining, but the temperature has dropped. It's down to freezing again, but it is still nonetheless a nice day to be aboard the boat. Now, in recent weeks, I have done a couple of videos, one about DIY projects that I want to do aboard the boat, and one about things I like and loathe about the little narrowboat. And on both videos, the comments section absolutely erupted with people either giving advice or having various other words of wisdom for me about what I was talking about. So I thought in this video I would do a quick update on some of those things, whether the DIY projects or the aspects of the boat that I either like or hate. We'll start with the bed, I think, and amongst various other issues. The main one was that when it is made up as a double, I said there isn't enough space for me crossways, and oh my goodness, I wish I had filmed this better, because the number of people I had in the comments saying, well, lie diagonally then. Now, I did actually say in the video, I've tried lying diagonally, but I did so while lying at this angle because I was frankly just too bone idle to actually move me and move the camera to show me lying diagonally. And I was also making a point about how sometimes if I lie across, I wake up on a diagonal anyway. But the point is, I have tried lying diagonally, and it's not quite right still, unfortunately. It's a lovely idea, but it's not quite right. I do grant you that, like this, I have the length I need so that my head isn't under the gunnels and my feet aren't under the gunnels, and yes, it is definitely better, but you know what? There's still something indefinable, intangible, that's just a bit peculiar about lying diagonally. And yes, I know this is a first world problem. I know I'm a lucky person to have a boat. To the person who wrote in the comments, well, at least you're not fighting in Ukraine, as if that's a relevant metric for anything. No, I know that this is not exactly the biggest dilemma in the world, but the video was things I like and dislike about the boat, and the shortness of the bed is one of those things. So I think it was valid to mention. But this isn't... It's okay. It's okay. I'm just saying it's not ideal. I was looking at things that weren't spot on, and the bed is one of them. And for the many, many, many people who said get a hammock, it wouldn't really work for me. I'm a roller. I start off on my left, then I roll over to the back, and then I roll over to the right, and then onto my front, and back and forth and back and forth. I would just tangle myself up in the hammock net or roll out onto the floor. A hammock is not going to work for me, lovely idea though it is. What I am pondering though is the notion of taking out the refrigerator and replacing it with a drawer type refrigerator down there, leaving the countertop coming out as far as it does, but then having this as a space without this wooden upright, and then the bed would extend under there and give me a full length bed that side. Meanwhile over here, same sort of thing. Take out the wooden end stop, leave the countertop overhanging because your feet can just come underneath it, so you still get the worktop and wouldn't have to muck about with the sink. But then take that cupboard off or cut it down so that it's only down there, and then this space all becomes a space for your feet, and that would make the beds full length on both sides. And then, as various other people said, just get a little infill here and then you'd have a massive double. That's quite a bit of major engineering, but it is feasible. And whilst I do have the tools to do the demolition part of that, cutting everything up, I've got a jigsaw and various other power tools I can use. Finishing, nice quality finishing that looks like it was original from the start, that's not really my forte. So if I am going to do that route, I would probably need to engage a proper boat carpenter who could make it all look like it had been done that way from the outset, because I'm pretty sure if I did it, it would not. Let us turn now then to the list of DIY improvements that I proposed. There has been very little progress on any of these because we have had the non-stop torrential rain and I haven't really been back to the boat much, but there's been a lot of thinking and there have been a few things done. We'll start with the simple one, the coat hook. I was pondering having a coat hook there or there, and as you can see, I went for the twin Mad Octopus hook, up high, space for at least 2 coats. You can get 4 on there if you want without it being too much, and people said, oh, that'll intrude into the gangway a bit. It does, but honestly, you don't really notice that. You can brush past these without any problem at all. So I can now have my wet coat hanging there, and as many people pointed out, if I'm out the back steering and I suddenly need to reach for a coat, there it is, and I can just grab it next to the engine instrumentation thing. So that is actually fine, and I'm very pleased with that. And that was all of 2 screws and 5 minutes, so I'm very pleased. The next thing to discuss is an outside thing, but the boat right next door to me is running his generator, so it's quite noisy out there, so I'm going to tell you about it inside. And you may recall I was having a dilemma of wanting to mount my 4G antenna outside and high up ideally so as to get the best signal, and this is the one I used to have on my old boat, and it comes with this mounting plate that is slightly curved, you can see there, to mount on a pole. So if you have a pole, clamp that to it and then stick the pole up and you get good Wi-Fi reception. And I was thinking there must be some way of mounting a vertical pole to the rails on my boat, which are there already. They're an integral part of the metalwork, and various people had good suggestions. And what I have bought is one of these, which is in fact an aerial mount. Normally the aerial itself goes on here, but what I'm going to screw on this is an extension which is tall, which looks like a pole, and then this, which is my actual aerial, clamps onto that pole. There's no way, I don't think. No, this won't directly mount onto that, and it wouldn't be high up even if it was. So that bit goes through the rails on the boat, and it just clamps together with these, which you use an Allen key for. And then this bit, it's a bit weird because this moves, so you can obviously imagine there's a long pole on the end of that. When I need to go under a bridge or go boating at all, just turn the whole thing down and lie it flat along the line of the boat, and then when I moor up, tilt it upwards, it's now pointing into the sky and the aerial is raised. The slightly weird thing about this, I'm sure there should be a spring in this, because you can turn this handle to clamp these 2 halves together. So turn, clamp, and it's now locked into place. That's locked vertically. But when you release it, which is a bit stiff, nothing happens. You'd think there'd be a spring in there that would push them apart. And I'm sure there ought to be, but there isn't. I've taken it apart. So you actually, at the moment, have to pull that like that. Now, I did buy this off eBay for half price, but it was brand new and boxed. So I'm at a loss to understand whether they genuinely come like this without some sort of spring that would push the 2 halves apart, or whether I got some weird duff one even though it was fully unopened and new. But I genuinely don't know where can one buy one small but powerful spring that I could put in here to push the 2 halves together when you release the lever. I don't know. Springs are us or something. Anyway, I've got both this and, the pole is outside, so it's a metre long pole that just screws onto this thread, and obviously then I can attach that to the top, and that solves the how to get the aerial up in the sky issue. Of course, I then still have to get the wires down into the boat, and that will involve taking that, what we've now discovered is the base of an old TV aerial, apart. I just need a screw-on cap for the top now. I mean, it doesn't really matter. Water will get in, it'll drain out at the bottom, but it would look nicer with some little screw-on cap. And then the wires will come down the bottom and potentially go in through there once I've worked out how to take that cap off. It is not, incidentally, one of those aerial holders where the aerial itself comes down through the roof, because as you can see, that is inside, that is solid wood. We've just got a tiny little hole where the cable comes through. So the one on top is purely a TV aerial mount for something that sticks upwards. It doesn't come down and sink into the boat. While we're out here, various people had suggestions about the solar panel, and again, I obviously didn't make it clear. When I laid the panel here, it was just because I didn't have anything to properly hold it on. So it is obviously going to be up at the level of the rails, at least flush with that, and at least flush with this. So these are not going to be causing any shadow on the panel. It will be at this sort of level, even if I'm hanging it on a bracket on these rails. And people are saying, oh, you're going to stop being able to use your rails. Well, I don't think an inch of bracket here and an inch of bracket here suddenly stops this rail being grabbable, so I don't really think that's a problem. So I've got two solutions at the moment. One is to have some L-shaped aluminium brackets across here with some pipe clamps around here, which seems like a nice solution. And the other is to actually clamp it with a piece of wood on here, and either just clamp it there and have some wooden chocks here, or even do a little wooden storage box like you see on some narrowboats and just have the solar panel on top. And I'm umming and ahhing between those two choices at the moment. Another small but pressing issue was how to bolt these doors together, because at the moment there's no way of holding them closed unless you shut the hatch, and I like having the hatch open for some air and sunlight sometimes, but it means these rattle in the wind. Now, various people said, well, all you need is a latch across the two doors, and as luck would have it, I had a series of little bolts back in my garden shed, so I brought one of those tiny little bolts, just one side on there, another side on there, high up again, people said, so you can reach over and get it from behind if you need to. But even that little bolt, with the tiny, tiny little screws that come with it, the wood here is only about 4 or 5 millimetres thick, and that tiny screw is too long for it. So I can't actually put that on without some bolstering piece of wood behind it. So I may either need to cut a little bit of wood that can sit under that, and then the whole lot can get screwed into there, or go with the other suggestion, which was some sort of thing to go across the top of the doors and jam them together, like a giant bulldog clip across the top of both of the doors. And again, I'm pondering which is the best solution. A little bit of wood under that would be fairly invisible. If I cut it to size, so it was literally that size, it would be fairly invisible, and I'd need one under the bit that this slides into. But equally, I don't know. I'm umming and ahhing about it. We'll have to see how that goes. With the bolt on the doors unable to be attended to immediately, my mind turns to the engine bilge when I did the oil and filter change. Was it last time I was here? The time before that. Anyway, I took the old oil filter off and, of course, didn't have anything to catch the old oil, so it all just went down into the bilge. There was already some oil there because narrowboat engines just seem to leak oil. It's a thing they seem to do. However, I don't really want it all sitting there in the bilge, particularly now I've taken the old oil filter off. There's got quite a lot. So I've bought two things. Firstly, a funnel, so that when I'm pouring fresh oil in, I can actually get it into the oil filler space instead of tipping it all over the engine. No matter how careful, no matter how much you turn the oil thing on its side and do it without the glugging, you're still going to end up tipping some over the engine, which I did, so I've now got a funnel. But also, to get that old oil out of the bilge and into the container with which I will then take it to the tip and dispose of it, nurse, the screens. I have a gigantic syringe which I can suckle the oil out, as I say. So let's go and give that a go.
There is the oil down there at the bottom. It is contained, in a sense, by the metalwork down there, but I don't want it spilling over into the dry bit behind. So if I can get the syringe in there, I should be able to suck it up. Ugh. There, that barely worked. Well, that's irritating.
It turns out there's not actually as much oil there as it looks. It looks like a great big pool of it, but it's such a thin amount that the nozzle of the syringe is barely dipping in and not really sucking much of it up. So it's good on the one hand. It means there isn't really that much oil down there. It just looks bad. So I am just going to have to resort to children's nappies and dab them around in there until it's all soaked up, I think. And that will have to do. Do I have any children's nappies with me? No. Had a little supply on the old boat, but no, not on this one. So again, put that on the to-do list. We turn to the matter of the water pump, which doesn't cut in when the accumulator pressure goes low. It doesn't cut in soon enough, rather. And various people were saying, oh, you need to repressurise your accumulator or whatever. There's nothing wrong with the accumulator. That pushes out the water perfectly fine. It's that this doesn't cut in when this has got to its low point. This needs to cut in sooner. And I was trying to find where on the pump you can adjust it, and there's just nothing on the back. And various people have said it's it's in here. This is the switch. So I think in order to get to that, I'm going to have to take this out. Luckily, the water tank is practically dry. So I think if I take that off to start with and lift that pipe up, we shouldn't get any dribbles, famous last words, into the actual boat. Clippy thing seems to come out. Now, how does that come out? That's all very loose right from the off. Is that just going to pull out? It looks like it is. Oh, there we go. Whee. Now, how can I hold that up out the way somehow? The technical solution is use a cushion. And that's fine, and that means I can now start dismantling this. It looks like we need a whatchamacallit for these bolts, as the pump and the filter are bolted down. I've got one somewhere, hang on. They appear to be 10mm. And they are sufficiently loose that I can do that, I think, without... Is that actually unscrewing? You know when you're turning something and turning it and you think, is it actually doing anything? I'm sorry to tell you, you've missed a fair bit of swearing there, as it turned out that unscrewing the nuts was doing nothing and I needed to unscrew the screws that were holding the whole thing down into the floor, and I took the pipe off the accumulator without realising there was still some water pressure in the accumulator, and that just went water everywhere over me and in these cupboards and things. So then I had to run and find the paper towel and do a lot of mopping up. You can imagine my language. I just paused for a second as I took that accumulator hose off, and it just... Yes. Anyway, I've now got the whole pump assembly out and can now look at taking the individual parts apart. There is where it sat. There's the piece of pipe that came off the accumulator, and the other one still being propped up by that cushion. And it has ended up in the sink, of course, because that's so the water can drain away. That's where the output of the accumulator was that sprayed me. So the accumulator still has pressure in it, clearly. It's just this pump that I need to tweak. Turns out there are nuts on the other side of this, which would explain why all the turning was doing absolutely nothing without a spanner to hold them in place. They were just going around. Now, I may not need to take everything off now, because with this exposed I should be able to just take those screws off. This is the pressure switch. There's the wires that go to the pump, so this turns the pump on and off depending on the pressure. So if I take this off, there may be a way of amending its switch in pressure. Well, having taken this apart, it does not appear to be adjustable. You've got this diaphragm here, and at the bottom of this, can I show you that? There's just a simple on-off micro switch, which is the little red thing, and inside this cylinder is just this flat thing and a spring. So this is pushing against that, it's all squished up like that, and when the pressure eventually gets low enough, this releases the micro switch. It must be micro switch held on, and then eventually the pressure gets less and less. It comes off the micro switch and starts the pump going again until the pressure is back up and it turns it off. So the only controlling mechanism is this spring. So there's no little simple dial or anything I can tweak to make the pressure different. Having now put it all back together, there's only one thing to do, which is put some water in the tank and see if it all spews out there or works as it is supposed to. Okay, watch closely everyone. Any sign of leaks? I've put just a little bit in the tank, and I will now switch the water pump back on and check that it's all functioning okay. Oh dear, the tap is on, and now the water pump is not working, so I've broken it. Rather strangely, even though we've switched the power on, the multimeter says we're not getting 12 volts to that circuit, so perhaps I've blown a fuse. It is now at least an hour later since that last clip, and I don't know what's going on. I have checked the voltage with a multimeter, and there is nothing appearing on those wires at the pump. And yet, the fuse is fine. There's continuity across the fuse. There's voltage at the fuse box, the normal 13 volts coming off the battery. So everything at that end is fine, 13 volts. The switch is turned on, and yet suddenly here, there's nothing. And yet the wire that runs from here to there, haven't touched that. All I did was take the water pump out, disconnect it from the wire, take the water pump out, put it back in again, and reconnect the wire. And yet suddenly the wire is not bringing the electricity along from the fuse box. So I'm absolutely baffled as to how a wire which was working earlier, as you saw, can suddenly decide it's not going to transmit the electricity anymore, even when that wire has not been touched, meddled with, or altered in any way, shape or form. And I really don't want to have to replace the wire because it goes behind all the polystyrene insulation and the woodwork of the boat, behind the fridge, behind the dinette, and it'd be a nightmare to replace that wire. So I'm absolutely at a loss. Power at that end, no power at this end. The switch is on, the fuse is fine, as I say, everything is normal up there, and then just at this end, nothing. I'm really in quite a bad mood, to be honest, so I think we'll leave it there. Cheerio.